Imagine a fruit so revered that ancient Greeks believed it was the prize that launched the Trojan War. A golden orb so fragrant that a single specimen could perfume an entire room for months. It graced the wedding tables of royalty, was prescribed by physicians as medicine, and offered a flavor so complex that it made the modern apple taste like flavored water. Yet, if you walk into a supermarket today, you might find it tucked away in a forgotten corner during a brief 2-week window in autumn, if you find it at all. And most shoppers will walk right past it, unaware they are ignoring one of humanity's most treasured fruits. This is not a story about a fruit that disappeared because it was inferior or because people stopped enjoying it. In fact, it vanished for the exact opposite reason. It was too demanding, too variable, and too complex for a food system that prizes shelf life above flavor, uniformity above character, and convenience above quality. We traded the perfumed gold of antiquity for a mealy supermarket apple that ships well in cardboard boxes. This is the story of the quince, the forgotten golden apple, and the industrial choices that erased it from our orchards and our consciousness. Welcome to Ancestral Yields. If you believe that the best food is not always engineered for maximum profit, and you want to rediscover the legendary fruits of history, please like this video and subscribe. We are cultivating the past to enrich the future, and we want you growing right alongside us. The botanical paradox. To understand why we lost the quince, you first have to understand what it actually is. Cydonia oblonga is not just another palm fruit. It is a botanical paradox that defies every assumption the modern consumer has about fruit. Most of the fruit we eat today, apples, pears, peaches, plums, are designed by centuries of breeding to be consumed raw. You pick them, maybe rinse them, and bite directly into sweet, soft flesh. They are instant gratification. They demand nothing of you. Quince is different, plays by ancient rules. When you pick a quince from the tree, it appears golden and promising, roughly the size and shape of a lumpy pear. The skin is covered in a soft fuzz that makes it look like it's wearing velvet. But bite into it raw, and you will immediately regret your assumption. The flesh is rock-hard, astringent, and brutally tannic. It will make your mouth pucker like you've licked a chalkboard. This is not a fruit that yields to impatience. But this apparent hostility is actually a sophisticated survival mechanism. The quince tree evolved in the harsh, rocky terrain between the Caspian and Black Seas, in what is now Iran and Turkey. The raw astringency protects the precious seeds from being consumed before they are ripe enough to propagate. The dense, woody flesh resists early rot and can hang on the tree well into late autumn, even after the first frosts. This is a fruit that demands transformation. It requires fire, time, and human skill to unlock its potential. And when you provide those things, the chemical alchemy that occurs is nothing short of miraculous. The numbers tell a story that supermarkets don't want you to know. When you analyze a raw quince, you find it contains high levels of pectin, far more than apples or pears, along with intense concentrations of aromatic compounds called terpenes. These are the same molecules that give roses, jasmine, and citrus their signature perfumes. But here's where it gets interesting. When you apply heat to quince, the woody cellular structure breaks down, releasing those trapped aromatics into the air. The harsh tannins polymerize and mellow. The abundant pectin creates a naturally thick, luxurious texture without any added thickeners. And most dramatically, the flesh transforms from pale cream to a deep, rose-colored red or amber, depending on the cooking method. This color change is not cosmetic. It is a chemical revelation. The transformation occurs because quince contains anthocyanins and other phenolic compounds that oxidize and concentrate during cooking, creating pigments that simply do not exist in the raw fruit. You are not just cooking it. You are completing its evolution. The fragrance is legendary. Place a bowl of ripe quinces on your kitchen counter, and within hours, the entire room will smell like a combination of pineapple, guava, vanilla, and rose petals. This is not a subtle hint of fruit. This is an olfactory announcement. Medieval Europeans would place quinces in their linen closets and wardrobes to perfume their clothes. In Persia, they were kept in rooms as natural air fresheners. But the industrial food system has no use for a fruit that requires effort. It has no category for something that smells like paradise but tastes like punishment when raw. It cannot tolerate a product that demands the consumer possess knowledge and skill. So the quince was quietly removed from the catalog of acceptable fruits. The fruit of kings and conquerors. The quince was not always an outcast. For thousands of years, it was considered the superior fruit, the one by which all others were measured. In ancient Greece, the quince was sacred to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. It was customary for a bride to eat a quince before entering the bridal chamber, ensuring that her first words to her husband would be sweet and perfumed. The golden apple that Paris awarded to Aphrodite, sparking the Trojan War in Greek mythology, was almost certainly not an apple at all. It was a quince. The Greeks called it Melon Kydonia, the apple of Cydonia, a city in Crete famous for its quince cultivation. The Romans were equally obsessed. Pliny the Elder documented multiple varieties and preparation methods in his Natural History. Columella wrote detailed instructions for quince cultivation in De Re Rustica. They preserved quinces in honey, fermented them into wine, and cooked them into a thick, sweet paste called melamine, the ancestor of all modern fruit preserves. When the Roman Empire collapsed, the quince did not disappear. It migrated with the monks and the Muslims. In the medieval monastery gardens of Europe, quince trees were mandatory plantings, valued for both their medicinal properties and their culinary versatility. The fruit was believed to aid digestion, cure nausea, and strengthen the stomach, claims that modern science has partially validated, as cooked quince does contain compounds that can soothe gastrointestinal inflammation. But it was in the Islamic world that quince reached its highest culinary expression. Persian and Arab cooks developed sophisticated techniques for incorporating quince into savory dishes. They understood what European cooks often missed, that quince's floral sweetness and tannic complexity could balance rich meats and create layers of flavor impossible with other fruits. In Persian cuisine, quince appears in koreshi bay, a stew where lamb is braised with yellow split peas, saffron, and chunks of quince that slowly dissolve into the sauce, adding both sweetness and a haunting floral note. In Moroccan tagines, quince is cooked with lamb or chicken, cinnamon, and honey until the meat and fruit become almost indistinguishable in texture, creating a dish that is simultaneously sweet, savory, and profound. The Portuguese took the quince obsession even further. They created marmelada, a thick, sliceable paste made by cooking quince with sugar until it reaches a firm, almost candy-like consistency. This was not jam. It was something far more sophisticated, a confection that could be cut into geometric shapes, wrapped in paper and stored for years. The word marmalade comes directly from marmelada, though the English eventually applied the term to citrus preserves, forgetting the fruit that gave the technique its name. For the nobility of Europe, quince paste was a status symbol. It was molded into elaborate shapes, decorated with gold leaf, and presented at banquets as a demonstration of both wealth and refinement. Spanish membrillo became the traditional accompaniment to manchego cheese, a pairing so perfect that it has survived to this day in Spanish cuisine, one of the few remaining echoes of quince's former glory. The fruit reigned supreme from ancient Greece through the Renaissance. It was medicine, perfume, dessert, and savory ingredient. It was the fruit of wedding feasts and funeral rites. It was woven into poetry, painted in still lives, and prescribed by physicians. So how did a fruit with such an illustrious history vanish so completely from the modern table? The apple's hostile takeover. The downfall of the quince did not come from a blight or a disease. It came from a shift in agricultural economics and consumer psychology triggered by the Industrial Revolution of the 19th and early 20th centuries. This was the era when food production moved decisively away from local, seasonal consumption toward national and international markets. The question was no longer what grows well here and tastes good, but rather what can be harvested efficiently, stored indefinitely, and shipped across continents. Enter the modern apple. Before the 1800s, apples were extraordinarily diverse. There were thousands of local varieties, each adapted to specific climates and purposes. Some were for cider, some for cooking, some for fresh eating, and some for long storage. Many were small, tart, or even bitter. But then something changed. Nurseries and agricultural colleges began a systematic breeding program to create apples with specific commercial traits. They needed to be large and visually uniform for eye appeal at market. They needed to be sweet enough to eat raw with no preparation. They needed to have thick skins that could withstand rough handling during transport. They needed to store well in cold warehouses for months without refrigeration. And most importantly, they needed to produce consistent crops year after year. With minimal labor, the apple breeders succeeded spectacularly. Varieties like Red Delicious were engineered to be almost comically red, perfectly symmetrical, and tough enough to survive being thrown into a barrel and shipped across the country by rail. The flavor was secondary. The texture was irrelevant. What mattered was that every apple looked identical and arrived intact. The quince could not compete with this visual propaganda. In the market stall, the human eye is drawn to bright colors, smooth skin, and familiar shapes. The fuzzy, lumpy, greenish-gold quince looked primitive next to the glossy red perfection of a commercial apple. Consumers began to equate visual perfection with quality, unaware that they were trading complexity for conformity. But the aesthetics were only part of the problem. The quince's biology made it fundamentally incompatible with industrial agriculture. Unlike apples, which can be eaten immediately after harvest, quinces require processing. They need to be cooked, which means the consumer must possess knowledge, time, and cooking skills. In an era when food companies were actively trying to eliminate cooking from the American kitchen, pushing canned goods, frozen dinners, and instant foods, a fruit that demanded hours of simmering was an anachronism. Quinces also have irregular ripening. On a single tree, fruits might ripen over a 6-week period rather than all at once. For the commercial orchard that needs to harvest everything in a single mechanical pass to minimize labor costs, This variability is unacceptable. The harvest crew cannot return to the same tree week after week. Everything must be ready simultaneously. Furthermore, quinces are variable in size and shape. Even within a single cultivar, you might get some fruits the size of a baseball and others the size of a softball. They might be round or pear-shaped or lumpy and irregular. This makes them impossible to grade mechanically. They do not fit neatly into standardized packaging. They are chaos in a system that demands order. The processed food industry also found quinces incompatible with their methods. When industrial food processors tried to make quince products, they ran into problems. The fruit's high pectin content, which makes it perfect for artisanal preserves, causes issues in large-scale processing equipment, can clog pipes and filters. The long cooking time required to achieve that beautiful pink color is energy-intensive and slows production. Meanwhile, apples could be processed into sauce, juice, or pie filling with minimal effort, using high-speed machinery that required no human judgment. Apples were the perfect industrial fruit. Predictable, uniform, and compliant. As agriculture scaled up, it collided with quince's fundamental nature. The quince was artisanal in an age demanding mass production. It was individual in an era requiring standardization. It was slow in a culture that worshipped speed. When the tractor and the supermarket took over food production, the quince was fired. It was deemed inefficient. The industrial food system is built on volume and consistency, not on flavor or cultural heritage. A fruit that demands knowledge, skill, and patience is a fruit that has no place in a supply chain optimized for quarterly profits. So the nurseries stopped propagating quince trees. The agricultural extension services stopped recommending them. The seed catalogs dropped them from their listings. And within 2 generations, the golden apple of the gods was reduced to an obscure curiosity, surviving only in the orchards of eccentric gardeners and immigrant communities who refused to forget. The homestead revolutionary. However, the very traits that made quince a failure for industrial agriculture make it extraordinary for the homestead gardener and the food preservationist. If you are exhausted by the demands of annual vegetable gardening, the tilling, the planting, the weeding, the constant attention, the quince tree is your liberation. This is the ultimate low-maintenance fruit crop. A quince tree, once established, is nearly indestructible. It is resistant to most common fruit tree diseases. It laughs at drought once its roots are deep. It tolerates poor soil that would make an apple tree sulk and refuse to fruit. It requires virtually no pruning to produce abundant crops. You plant it once, and it rewards you for decades. The yield is staggering for such a low-input crop. A mature quince tree can produce anywhere from 50 to 200 pounds of fruit annually, depending on the variety and growing conditions. And because the fruit stores remarkably well, lasting for months in a cool, dry location, you are not racing against spoilage the way you would with peaches or strawberries. For the permaculture designer, quince is a strategic asset. It flowers relatively late in spring, after most killing frosts, which means it fruits reliably year after year even in regions where late spring freezes destroy apple and pear blossoms. It can tolerate partial shade better than most fruit trees, making it useful for underplanting in food forests or filling awkward corners of the property that get morning sun but afternoon shadow. The tree itself is beautiful. In spring, it produces large, pale pink blossoms that are among the showiest of all fruit tree flowers. In autumn, the golden fruits hang like ornaments against the yellowing leaves. Even in winter, the twisted, architectural branches create visual interest. You are getting food, fragrance, and ornamental value from a single planting. But the real revolution happens in the kitchen. When you cook quince, you are participating in an ancient form of food alchemy that has been practiced continuously for over 4,000 years. The techniques have been passed down through generations, refined and perfected, creating a culinary knowledge base that industrial food processing has tried to make obsolete. The simplest preparation is also the most revelatory. Poached quince. You peel and quarter the fruit, removing the core. You simmer the pieces in water with sugar, perhaps with a cinnamon stick, a few cloves, and a strip of lemon peel. After an hour or 2, the transformation is complete. The hard, pale flesh has become tender, deep rose-colored, and intensely perfumed. The cooking liquid has turned into a fragrant syrup. You have created something that tastes like no other fruit on earth, simultaneously floral, fruity, and spiced, with a complexity that builds with every bite. This poached quince can be eaten as dessert, spooned over yogurt or ice cream, layered into tarts, or preserved in jars for winter enjoyment. The syrup can be reduced further into a glaze for roasted meats or mixed with sparkling water to create a sophisticated beverage. Then there is membrillo, the thick quince paste that has been a staple of Spanish and Portuguese cuisine for centuries. You cook quince with an equal weight of sugar, stirring constantly as it thickens into a deep amber paste. You pour it into molds or pans, let it cool and set, and then you have a confection that will last for years without refrigeration. Sliced thin and served with aged cheese, it is one of the perfect food pairings. The sweet floral paste cutting through the salty, funky cheese in a way that makes both taste better. For the adventurous, there are the savory applications that Middle Eastern cooks have perfected. Quince roasted with lamb or chicken creates dishes of extraordinary depth. The fruit's tannins and pectin break down during the long cooking, thickening the sauce naturally while adding layers of flavor that you cannot achieve with any other ingredient. It is not sweet in the dessert sense. It is complex, aromatic, almost haunting. And there is quince liqueur, where the fruit is steeped in alcohol with sugar, creating a deeply colored, intensely aromatic spirit that captures the essence of autumn in a bottle. Every one of these preparations requires time and attention. You cannot rush them. You cannot hack them with shortcuts or substitutions. They demand that you slow down, pay attention, and participate in the transformation. This is precisely why industrial food culture abandoned them, and precisely why they are valuable to reclaim. The rebellion of flavor. The story of the quince is a reminder that agricultural progress often means the elimination of quality in favor of quantity. We sacrificed the most aromatic fruit in European cuisine for the convenience of an apple that can be thrown in a lunchbox. We allowed efficiency to dictate our diet, narrowing the vast biodiversity of traditional orchards down to a handful of commercial cultivars that fit neatly into supermarket supply chains. We forgot that food is not merely fuel. It is culture, history, skill, and sensory pleasure. But we can choose to opt out of that system. Growing quince today is an act of culinary rebellion. It is a rejection of the premise that food should be convenient above all else. It is a statement that you value flavor complexity over visual uniformity, that you are willing to invest time and skill to experience something that ancient Greeks considered worthy of the gods. When you plant a quince tree, you are not just adding another fruit crop to your garden. You are connecting yourself to a chain of human knowledge that stretches back to the Bronze Age. You are preserving genetic diversity that industrial agriculture has tried to erase. You are creating abundance that requires minimal ongoing input but rewards you with maximum flavor. You are choosing to remember what the food system wants you to forget, that the best things are not always the easiest, and that true quality cannot be mechanized, standardized, or optimized away. It is time to bring the golden apple back to our orchards and our tables. It is time to plant a legacy that will perfume your autumn and sweeten your winter, defying the industrial wasteland with every fragrant harvest. If you are ready to fill your homestead with crops that history remembers but agribusiness forgot, hit that subscribe button for ancestral yields. We have more forgotten orchards to rediscover, and the best way to fight the system is to grow something it cannot sell you. See you in the garden.